If you fancy making a Mandy boat tee just like this, split included, then keep watching. Hi everyone, welcome back to the vlog. This is Susie from Thread Quarters. Thanks so much for joining me again today. Today is a long-awaited, requested video, a tutorial on sewing up Mandy boat tee, which is a pattern by Tessuti Patterns. It's also a free pattern, so do check that out. The link will be in the description box below to go and get your own. When I made this, they only had one size fits all, which is the pattern I'm using, but I think at the end of last year they updated that, and there's now a multi-size pattern option which is also free. So just to give you a heads up as to which one I'm making, I'm going to guess that the one size fits all size probably correlates with their medium. I'm gonna guess. So the first thing you're going to have to do obviously is go and get your pattern. It's a PDF download, so I know some of you guys don't like that, but it is a free pattern, and you got to print it out, stick it together, cut it out, as per all PDF patterns. And then choose your fabric. I am a sucker for a striped fabric for a Mandy boat tee for some reason. I just think they go together so well. So I picked up this fabric, which I just think is absolutely gorgeous. Here's a bit of a close-up. You see, red and white stripes. It's a viscose jersey. Yeah, you can sew this completely on your sewing machine if you don't have an overlocker. I will mention the times when I'm using the overlocker. I will chat about how you could be using your sewing machine instead. You do need a sewing machine to do certain parts of this tutorial, and not just on your overlocker. So if you are using your overlocker, you do need to have your sewing machine ready to go as well. Needles need to be a knit needle, stretch needle, ballpoint needle. Those are all different terms for very similar needles. Any of those will work. Because you're going for a lightweight jersey, I would be picking a needle size 80 or 12. They're the same thing, just different numbers for the same thing. I cut out with pins and scissors. If you want to go ahead and use pattern weights and a rotary cutter and mat, that's fine. It's your own personal preference. I am just team scissors. This tutorial does show you how to do a split hem as well. The pattern itself doesn't have a split hem, but it's just a little detail that I really like, and I think it really suits the Mandy boat tee, so I do add it to my Mandys. So I'll show you how to do that. So it's also high-low, so it's higher in the front, lower in the back. Again, it's just a nice little detail. I like to sometimes tuck in, half tuck my t-shirt in at the front as well, and I think it's quite flattering wearing it like that. I know some of you have been wanting to know how to do the split hem tutorials, so here you go. So the Mandy boat tee is made up of 3 pieces, the front piece, the back piece and the sleeve. Because I'm doing a shorter front, I'm going to fold up along this line here, that's the length and shorten line, and that is going to be the length of my piece going forward. Right, so the next step is to get out your fabric, fold it up, and I've got a striped fabric, so this takes quite a bit of time of making sure that the stripes are aligned properly, a lot of fiddling and readjusting, and once you've got it in place, then what you can go ahead and do is pin on the lines just to ensure that they don't move out of place. Again, do it on the other side as well. Now I only have 1 meter of this fabric, and because I'm doing a shorter front piece, I am actually able to fit Mandy boat tee, including the sleeve, onto 1 meter. So in a little bit I'll show you just how close of a squeeze this is. And just a reminder that this is the one size pattern that I'm using rather than a multi-size. So just lining up the edges of the sleeve piece with the same stripe right at the corners, pinning it in place. As you can see, right at the hem of the sleeve, I am at the very edge of my fabric. I have to uncurl the edges there just to make it fit. Just making sure that the stripes are definitely lined up. Positioning the back piece now, it needs to be on the fold, so I have to turn this over, put it over there. Now I want to line up my stripes. That's the bottom of my sleeve for the front and the back, and that little point I'm going to make sure both pieces for the front and the back, and I'm making it on the bottom part of a red stripe, pinning that in place, making sure they definitely line. There's a little bit of fabric overlap here, but I'm just ensuring that both pattern pieces can fit onto smooth flat fabric when I'm cutting out, so that's fine. I'm pinning it all in place now. So finish up your pinning and then it is time to cut out. I use scissors, but use a rotor cutter if you prefer. You're going to see me turning my pieces around here, but that's because I can't get around my table. If you can get around your fabric, you're better to walk around your fabric and cut rather than moving your fabric like I'm doing. And there we go, that's our 3 pieces cut out and ready for sewing. The first step is to sew the neckline, and this is at a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So we're just going to fold over the edge, wrong sides together. So we're currently looking at the wrong side of the fabric, and what I'm turning over and pinning, you're seeing the right side here off the turn. And this is going to be the front neckline. And just a case of making sure you keep that 5/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around. That's why I keep using my seam gauge, just to make sure, or you can eyeball it if you're confident, and pin it all in place. And then we'll just go ahead and do the same with the back neckline, get them both ready to stitch. Before you start any sewing project and sewing on your actual pieces, it's always a good idea to test out your stitching to make sure that the tension is right and the size of your stitches is right. We're going to be sewing on a zigzag stitch for the neckline, and this is me just testing out on a scrap of fabric, and I'm changing the tension on my zigzag. I do it about 3 times before I'm happy to start stitching on the actual neckband, and there we go. That's me, 3rd time lucky, going with this tension on the 3rd one there. So it's just a case of using your zigzag stitch and stitching on the right side of the fabric. I'm keeping the edge of my foot on the edge of the fabric, and that will be my guide for my stitching. And I'm going to sew all the way around the front neckline, not sewing over pins, of course. You'll also see that I have a walking foot on my machine. This just helps when you're sewing with jersey on a sewing machine, but it's not necessary. If you don't have one, it doesn't matter, it'll be fine. And there we go, neckband done. And now I'm just doing the back neckband as well. Exactly the same as the front, you do them separately, which is a bit unusual for a jersey top. Once your neckbands are stitched, we are going to be sewing the shoulder seams along there. And before you do that, make sure you press your freshly sewn neckbands or necklines and right sides together. Place your front and back pieces together at the shoulders. And we're now going to take a little bit of time and concentrate on lining up our stripes so that we get a lovely chevron effect on the shoulders. So it just takes a little bit of time to carefully position your stripes on top of one another. And what you'll see me doing here is actually measuring the seam allowance and finding a stripe on the seam allowance, putting a pin through the fabric to the other side to make sure that the stripe on the other piece is in line, that it's hitting the top of the stripe on both pieces there at the seam allowance, which is 3/8 of an inch. Do note that that is smaller than the seam allowance that we were using to sew up the neckband. And here is just a close-up again. I'm just pinning that line in place just to keep it nice and neat, and then we're going to go over to this stripe over here beside the pin that we put in first of all, and again I'm going to use my seam gauge, measure my 3/8 of an inch seam allowance and put the pin in place. And then we're just going to go ahead and do the same with the other shoulder seam. Again, just making sure the stripes line up at the 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. When both shoulders are pinned, we're going to sew up the shoulder seams. I'm going to be doing it on the overlocker, but if you have a regular sewing machine, that's just fine. You can use a lightning stitch for this. And of course, test out your tension as we did with the sewing machine stitches. And when you're happy, go ahead and sew up the shoulder seams and keep the edge of the fabric to the right hand edge of the presser foot. And then you get lovely chevrons. Back to the regular sewing machine to finish off the neckline. Make sure that you change it from a zigzag stitch to a straight stitch for this particular bit. Just get your sizing right of your stitching, just regular size stitching. And what we're going to be doing is a little wedge from the edge of the neckline diagonally towards the shoulder seam. And I'm going to be using my seam gauge just to check. I've sort of picked that red stripe there, but if you don't have a stripe and you want to do similar to me, it is approximately 5/8 of an inch away from the edge of the shoulder seam, and I'm going to go straight across with a straight stitch. So it tapers away to the shoulder seam, and if you can see it there, that's a straight line all the way across there like that, and this just creates a really nice finish to your neckline. Then you're just going to go ahead and do the same to the other side. So as I said in the beginning, I am doing this split hem alteration to this Mandy boat tee, and for that reason I am going to overlock the side seams here on each side. So starting from the underarm, going down to the hem, going across the hem, up the other side, and then of course on the back as well, down the side and across the hem. This is purely for aesthetic purposes, and if you don't have an overlocker, you don't need to do this. In fact, I'm going to leave my sleeve unoverlocked just to show you the difference. But if you do want to do overlocking, do it for the sleeve as well. So that is now overlocked, as I said, on the sides and on the hem, and if you are going to be doing this, then go ahead and do it on the sleeve side seams as well. So that's your neck opening there, and this curve here is your arm opening. That's just a bit of overlocking bit that we can cut off when we're sewing this. And we are going to attach our sleeve piece. So this is the right side facing up, and we're going to get the right side facing down of our sleeve piece. I'm holding the sleeve piece here. We're going to find the little notch that's in the middle of the large curved end, and that's the top, that's your shoulder mark. You can see there's my notch. So we're going to place that notch and align it with the shoulder seam there, and as you can see, the sleeve piece is facing towards me, which might be counterintuitive, and you've got these two opposing curves that we are going to have to fit together. And it looks a little bit difficult if you've never done this before, but it is really simple, so don't worry. Pin that notch in place with the seam, with the shoulder seam. And just a reminder again that we've got right sides together of our fabric, of our two pieces. And then we're going to take the corner of the sleeve piece and match it with the underarm and pin that in place. Don't worry about moving the rest of the fabric, it doesn't matter. Just get that in the perfect position and pin it. And again, the other corner with the other underarm, and again everything's going to move around, so don't worry about that. Just make sure that that corner is in the perfect position and pin it in place. And then now you can sort of see that's what our sleeve's going to look like when it's sewn. And I've put it back into position there and just put it like that so you could see. And speeding up a little bit here, I am pinning the rest of the sleeve in place here. It's up to you how many pins you want to put in. If you're happy enough with the 3, then go ahead. Some people don't even use any pins, but if you're brand new to this, put as many pins as you like. And just make sure that it all lines up together. Now this pin, you're going to see that it's just not going to lie flat, so don't worry about that. Just give it a wee shake and line it up, and then go ahead and do your other shoulder as well. And here we are now at the overlocker. I've got my body part underneath and my sleeve on top, and just get this in under the overlocker foot first of all. The edges of the fabric line up with the right hand side of the overlocker foot. And that is the hardest bit, so get your first couple of stitches in. Once you've done a few stitches, then your fabric is now anchored and it's not quite as stressful. It's not going to move around as much. And then just go ahead and overlock the rest of the shoulder seam. One thing to remember is that when you get to the notch that's at the shoulder seam there, make sure that your left hand needle is to the left of the notch, and otherwise you will have a hole in the top of your shoulder. So just make sure that that is lined up and you'll be good to go. Then go ahead and finish off that shoulder and the other shoulder. And here we go. One sleeve nearly done. Once all that overlocking has been done, we are going to put right sides together in preparation for sewing up the side seams. And there's going to be a little bit of stripe matching involved now. And the first thing to do is to line up your underarm seams and make everything smooth and nice and neat. And don't forget that I have left that unoverlocked along there just to show you what it's like and the difference between using the overlocker there and not. So again, just a little bit of tweaking involved, smoothing everything out and trying to line up these stripes. So zooming in a little bit, I just thought I would talk through very briefly about stripe matching if you've not done it before. Just take your time and try your best to position the fabric so that the stripes line up. Main point is to make sure that this underarm seam is matching, so get that pinned in place first of all, and then a few little tweaks and whatnot. Pin stripes together. If you want, you can pin every single stripe or just pick a few and pin them, just whatever you're most comfortable with. And then flip it over, make sure that it's definitely in line. That looks good, so we can move on to the side seams. And again, it's just positioning the two sides together, getting the lines lined up and pinning the lines in place. You can see me just sort of working with the fabric there to make it move the way I want it to, and pinning lines in place. Okay, and we have the side pinned in place, and now I'm going to work out where I want the split of my split hem to be, and I sort of picked out just by eye that particular stripe. I think it will look like a nice spot. And I'm going to measure it here for you to show you, so if you want to just copy exactly what length I'm going to have, that is 9.5 centimeters up from the hem on the front of the Mandy boat tee. So 9.5 centimeters I've chosen to pick there, but I did that in line with one of the stripes. So if you have stripes that don't exactly work with that, then just work with your stripes instead. What I actually like to do is cross 2 pins together at that particular point, and then I know that that spot there is where I'm going to be starting my stitching. So we're going to be sewing the side seams up on the regular sewing machine, and I'm going to be using the lightning stitch. So here I'm just looking for what number that is on my machine, and just to show you what it looks like here, that's the lightning stitch there, so that's number 42. So you want to go ahead and set up your machine so that it's at the right, oh I went the wrong way, the right stitch. And then again, like we did at the beginning, let's get a scrap of fabric and just check our stitching, make sure that the tension's right and we're happy with the way it looks. You can see it's got some good stretch there, and that's what the lightning stitch looks like. So once we're happy with our stitches, we're going to start sewing up our side seams and our underarm in one go. Just take your time here and really make sure that each stripe is sitting on top of its corresponding one underneath, and they're all lining up. Make sure that your the right hand side of your fabric is lined up with the right hand side of the presser foot as well. And just take your time and make sure that you get those stripes matching. Once you reach the underarm seams here, what I like to do is actually position them so that one is facing towards you, I've got the top one facing towards me, and then the one underneath I'm having facing away from me. It just reduces a bit of bulk underneath your arm. So we have got our side seams sewn up, and what we're going to do now is press open these seams, and then I'll show you how to do the split hem at the bottom. So I'm actually using a little sleeve press here. It's really handy for things like this. Zooming in, this is the top of the split, and we've got the front here and the back there, and I am using the seam gauge just to make sure that I just continue to iron over the edge of my fabric the same amount as the seam allowance further up where it's actually been sewn, if that makes sense, just to keep it all even. And then do the same on the back piece as well, and just iron it down and make sure it's all about 3/8 of an inch folded over and ironed in place. And then I'm going to go ahead and pin these hems down, and we're going to do the bottom hem now. So dealing with this corner, if you want to get fancy, you could miter it. You know, I don't care about that, and folding it over like that is fine for me. And again, I am keeping this the 3/8 of an inch for the hem, and using the seam gauge to make sure that that is even. Also, if you're using a stripe fabric, do keep that in mind as well. And if you haven't cut your fabric perfectly in line with your stripes, now is the opportunity to sort that out and make sure that you don't end up with a stripe that goes wonky on your hem. I'd also like to just point out at this moment in time that in retrospect, I do think that I could have done aesthetically, I could have done with turning up my back hem a good bit more, maybe about an inch instead, or even a bit more. So do bear that in mind if you're doing this. I might even go back and change mine. And now we've got to the other hem, or the other split, I should say. So again, just treating it the same way as we did the first split, and making sure that the two sides turned over with 3/8 of an inch allowance, ironing them flat. Pinning in place. And here we've got another corner to deal with. Tuck in your little overlocking threads as well. Keep them out of the way, make it nice and neat. And I decide just to fiddle with this a little bit more, just to sort of neaten it up a bit so it's not quite poking over the edge. And so there we go, we've got everything. We've got the front hem pinned all the way around there, up our little notch, and up there and down the sides, down the back and up again to the other split hem. And I've also gone ahead and pinned my arms as well. So back to my lightning stitch, that's what I'm going to choose to sew my hem with, and we're going to start just along this split hem here, and just start about 1 centimetre above where the notch begins, if you can see that, and position your needle over to the left hand side a bit. We'll make it a bit easier, and I'm going to try and sew roughly where the edge of that overlocking is, the right hand side of the overlocking. That's sort of going to be my guide, but each to their own. This is where you can just choose what you want to do, it's no bother. And just sew on up, and sew down to the bottom of the hem there, and then I like to use a pin actually just to make sure that fabric goes under my presser foot smoothly. Put your needle into the fabric, lift your presser foot and pivot your fabric. So this is one of the main parts of doing the split hem, a lot of pivoting. And once you are in position to sew your hem up, then off you go and sew the rest of your hem until you get to the next corner. And again, take your time, go slow, and when you think you're in the right spot, needle down, presser foot up, spin your fabric, and presser foot down again, and sew on up to about 1 centimetre above the start of your notch. Then once you get to about 1 centimetre above, it's all about the pivoting. So your needle's down, presser foot's up, spin your fabric round, presser foot down, and here we go. We're going to just sew across above the notch, and again just get your needle in position, more pivoting. And now we're sewing down the other side of the split hem. And just keep doing that all the way around the rest of your hem. Just showing here that I use my pins an awful lot to help maneuver my fabric and just make sure that everything is sitting in the right place. I'm sort of actually pushing my fabric there with my pin to get it under the presser foot. And more pivoting. And then just keep sewing your hem up. And there we go, a really beautiful notched hem. Finally, we're going to hem our sleeves. So I've got them inside out, and that is the outside of the fabric, that is the inside of the fabric. I've not overlocked the edges there, but I would recommend overlocking the edges if you do have an overlocker. But again, I'm just showing you that you don't need an overlocker to make this top. And use your lightning stitch or a zigzag stitch to sew this up, about 1 centimeter seam allowance, and you are done. And there you go, you have made your own Mandy boat tee, and I hope you get so much wear out of it. I wear mine, collection of them, so much. It's pretty much my wardrobe with skinny jeans. That's my uniform. I do really love them. They're great sort of intermediate weather, just nice and light and cooling, but just a little bit more coverage, so I really do love it. Thanks so much for watching, guys. If this is the kind of content you like, then please do hit the thumbs up button, please subscribe, and do hit the notification bell down there, and you'll get a little email letting you know when I have a new video uploaded. I do plan on getting a few more tutorials and tips and tricks up here, so if that's the kind of thing you like, then do subscribe. Anyway, until next time, bye guys.